千里之行，始于足下。A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath the feet. We now gather in the Tao to travel the journey together. Welcome to Tao Talks with Derek Lin, where we take a deep dive into the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. I would like to extend a warm welcome to you. Thank you for joining us. I would like to invite you to center your thoughts and direct your attention to this moment in time, to the here and now, to be fully present and mindfully aware as we all ready ourselves for this sacred process in the Tao with one another. And now, without further ado, let's get started with Tao Te Ching 24. The chapter title for 24 is To Disengage. The meaning of this title comes from the last line of the chapter. What it says is that there are things in life that run counter to the Tao, meaning they are contrary to nature, they are unnatural. So those who understand the Tao and embrace nature will refrain or avoid them. Indeed, they will actively disengage from them or not engage in them in the first place. Another way to say it is that they do not abide in such things. They want nothing to do with them. This chapter is a shift in tone. Previous chapters emphasized the goodness in following the Tao. To follow the Tao is to hold on to or keep to the constant Tao or the eternal Tao. When we say constant in the Tao context, it is noted that life is always changing, so change is the only constant. It is the eternal constant and therefore the Tao. This chapter shifts to the other perspective, the flip side, if you will. That is, the dangers of going against the natural flow of everything. So shifting from the goodness of following the Tao to the dangers of not doing so. Now, what are the things that are counter to the Tao? Well, they are the same things we have discussed in previous chapters, like flaunting, showing off, presuming oneself to be correct, which is an arrogant expression of certitude, praising oneself, boasting, or bragging. These things that we have discussed before are repeated here because Lao Tzu evidently has strong feelings about why such things should be avoided by us at all costs. One side note that I would like to mention is that when you and I explore the world of philosophy, sometimes we come across the idea that there's no real good or bad in the world. We only perceive them as such. In other words, it is only our perceptions that make things out to be good or bad. In this chapter, we can see the Tao transcending philosophy because Lao Tzu cuts to the chase. Lao Tzu makes it clear that excessive egotism, as an example, is simply not good for us or for anyone. Speaking from a personal perspective, the more I experience life myself, the more I find this to be true. The more I find Lao Tzu to be correct. Let us take a look at the chapter together. 道德经 24. Those who are on tiptoes cannot stand. Those who straddle cannot walk. Those who flaunt themselves are not clear. Those who presume themselves are not distinguished. Those who praise themselves have no merit. Those who boast about themselves do not last. Those with the Tao call such things leftover food or tumors. They despise them. Thus, those who possess the Tao do not engage in them. So as I mentioned, the last line, that those who have the Tao do not engage. That is where the chapter title comes from. The next to last line is a highlight of Lao Tzu expressing his strong observation and rejection of all those things that we talk about as expressions of arrogance. Now, let us take a look at the repeating patterns in this chapter. Relatively short, only 9 lines. Scanning from the top down, right away, we can see 2 repeating characters in lines 1 and 2. In the first 2 lines, the middle 2 characters are the same. I'm highlighting them so they are easier to see. These patterns do not persist beyond the second line, so we can safely conclude that the first 2 lines form a couplet. They are the same length, each one having 4 characters, and they are poetically constructed to make a point. We'll get to that point in a moment. For now, let us scan further down to see if we can detect additional patterns. In the next 4 lines, that is from line 3 down to line 6, we can see the middle character is the same for all 4 lines. The middle character being the third character in each line, because every line has 5 characters. Then, for 3 out of the 4 lines, we have the 4th character repeating as well. So the only exception there will be line 5. Let me highlight what I just said to make it easy to see. So there, we have the middle characters up and down. We have the 4th character persisting except line 5. The difference in the fourth character is that line 5 has the character 无, whereas the other ones have the character 不, which means no or not. The difference is that 无, the different character in line 5, it means to not have. So that's why it is a different character. In addition to these repetitions that we're noting in the middle of the line, there's also the first character in the 4 lines that are exactly the same. Let me highlight that as well. So this is the character for self. In plural, selves. Now, these patterns that we're noting now, that we're highlighting, they are not found above line 3 or below line 6. So we can safely conclude that these 4 lines are the middle section, section 2. These are the most important part of this chapter. These lines are the central focus. Keep these 4 lines in mind as we delve deeper to explore the meaning of these lines. And finally, below line 6, we have 3 lines that do not really show any repeating patterns. That's okay. They don't all need to be poetic constructions. The last section, section 3, is just the conclusion. It makes an emphatic point about how Tao cultivators, Tao sages feel about the 4 lines in the middle. So we'll get to that. We start by analyzing the first line. Line 1. Those who are on tiptoes cannot stand. So I want to highlight the first 2 characters and point them out for your attention. Tiptoes. What does that mean? To be on tiptoes is just raising oneself a little higher for a short time. Now, I think you and I know just from personal experience that physically this is an unsteady, unstable position. It requires effort to maintain. Now, when Lao Tzu talks about tiptoeing, it is metaphoric and not literal. In this context, specifically, it is a metaphor for elevating oneself in an arrogant way. And what do we mean when we say elevating oneself? Well, there's 2 possible ways that we can see that. To raise oneself a little bit, it just means, number 1, to one up on others, to gain an advantage or do better. I think we all know one up, like one-upmanship. It is a common expression. It means gaining an edge or advantage over others. It is to stand out, and we also have expressions like standing head and shoulders above the competition or other people or peers. In social competition, people often try to outdo their peers. We see this all the time. They do this so much that even if the comparison is rather trivial or petty, people will still engage in them. It's an expression of the ego. As an example, think about what happens if somebody talks about attending a concert. Another person will then respond by claiming to have gone to the same event, but with better seats. Or same event, but with VIP tickets. Or have met the performer backstage. These are all ways to one-up or upstage somebody else in that kind of social competition. Another context is raising yourself up a little bit to be more visible. It just means you want to be seen by more people, and this metaphor is then connected to flaunting or highlighting, showcasing oneself. And what this tells us is that in this chapter, Lao Tzu is continuing his emphasis on humility or being humble, which we have seen in previous chapters. It's the same train of thoughts that continues into this chapter. So let's pull back one step and think about our own lived experience. The second part of this line is cannot stand. And the entire line is those who are on tiptoes cannot stand. So I am highlighting the last two characters there. To not be able to stand is easy to see when we consider how long we can keep ourselves on our toes. So from experience, we know that we struggle when we're tiptoeing. We're trying to balance ourselves and avoid stumbling. In this way, tiptoeing, we can see, is a suggestion. The metaphor suggests nobody can keep up the pretense for long. What I mean is pretending to be taller than you actually are by standing on your tiptoes. It becomes like an unnatural way to appear taller. And that is why, metaphorically, it represents any kind of attempt to show more than what is actually there, to impress other people, elevate yourself above your natural state. And I will further note, if it doesn't last, if it's only temporary, well, it cannot be the Tao. That which does not last is not congruent with the Tao. Trying to outdo other people in petty, trivial social competition, trying to showcase oneself, will result in failure. And we know that real life gives us a lot of evidence to support this idea. We see people who try to show off, but then they fail to improve their image. They end up looking desperate for attention. So right off the bat, we have the main ideas that we can extract from this chapter of the Tao Te Ching. There's the idea of going against nature. It's important because harmony comes from aligning ourselves to the natural order. And when we say tiptoeing is unnatural, it's like trying to be something you are not, trying to look better than you actually are. The other part that we extracted from this was transience. Any elevation, any temporary success that you gain by tiptoeing will go away. It's easily lost when you lose focus, when you lose balance, when you try to move. And one more thing that I would mention is that notice this is all about external validation. When you're tiptoeing, showing off to others, flaunting oneself, it is all about focusing on the external. The authentic Tao is the opposite. The focus is on inner peace and authenticity. And lastly, just to reiterate, this is all putting the emphasis on being humble, having humility. Continue on to line 2. Line 2 says, those who straddle cannot walk. So, delving into this line, starting with the first character, in modern Mandarin, this character means taking a big step. In ancient context, it can also mean to straddle, which is a stance with the legs wide apart. So you can see how this matches the first line. To be on tiptoes is to extend oneself vertically. To strike a wide-legged pose is to expand oneself in the horizontal direction. The other meaning, taking a big step. Taking big steps is an attempt to expand one's progress in the forward direction. So, either way, whether we're talking about big steps or legs wide apart, it's an attempt to draw attention. Either way, it is unnatural in the sense that the exaggerated steps or the wide stance would be an unnatural way to walk. It is a way to draw attention. So, similar to standing on tiptoes, the intent is to be noticed. And one more note about this is threat displays. What do I mean by that? Well, in the animal kingdom, many animals use a threat display of puffing themselves up or expanding their bodies to appear larger when they feel threatened. This behavior serves as a deterrent to predators, making the animal seem less vulnerable or more formidable. I want to put this here as a reminder that we human beings are part of the myriad things. We too belong in the animal kingdom. What many animals do, we do as well. Continuing on to the second part of this line. The line says, those who straddle cannot walk. So the last two characters are focusing on the inability to walk. Consider how long you can continue to walk with exaggerated steps. Experience would tell us that when we attempt to do so, we quickly get tired. Now, walking by itself is a metaphor in the Tao. To walk is to make progress in one's own personal journey, to walk on one's own path. And therefore, the metaphor Laozi is using is suggesting that too much attachment about drawing attention, gaining approval, it just gets in the way of you making real progress in your life, in whatever you wish to accomplish. If you are too concerned about appearance, you end up failing to walk your own path. We can see this in life, examples from other people and examples from our own lives. So putting these together, the first two lines, they tell us if we want to make progress in life, in whatever we want to do, we should, number one, keep a low profile. Low profile here would be the opposite of a contrived attempt to raise one's own profile. So not stand on tiptoes, metaphorically speaking. Number two is to take steps at a natural pace in order to go far. Not the exaggerated steps, not the exaggerated stance of the legs wide apart. Metaphorically, this points to living life one day at a time, not stopping, but also not rushing. In life, we all have many problems we're dealing with. Likewise, we solve them one at a time, not stopping, but also not rushing. Let me summarize these ideas in a slide that shows how tiptoeing and straddling are opposed to the Tao. So this slide includes all three in three different columns. I want to start out with alignment in terms of alignment with nature. Are you aligned or not aligned? If you're tiptoeing, as we mentioned, it is an unnatural way to stand. So that is opposed to nature. When you straddle, whether it's a big step or a wide stance, an unnatural way to walk. So this is also at odds with what is natural. Compare these to the Tao, flowing naturally, unforced. Just make it happen according to its nature. And that would not be tiptoeing or straddling. Then I want to examine the duration aspect of it, like how long can you keep that up? For tiptoeing, we know it is unsteady, unstable, it is temporary. Cannot tiptoe for long. Straddling also cannot be sustained for long. As I mentioned, we can tire ourselves rather quickly. And if we got legs spread wide apart, it is very difficult to walk. When we compare these to the Tao, as we noted, is that which lasts. And that is because the Tao is about that which is stable, that which is enduring and lasting. It is why when you and I cultivate the Tao, the joy and the goodness that you and I partake in They are stable, they last, they endure the test of time. For the third row, I want to take a look at the outcome of all three columns. For tiptoeing, well, sooner or later, you have to give up the effort or stumble. For straddling, exhaustion. And for the Tao, well, quite the opposite. What you get will be grace, balance, and harmony. So we can already see in the first three rows, the Tao is quite different from tiptoeing or straddling. So what is the motivation aspect of all of this? For tiptoeing, it's a desire to impress others. As I said, to one-up or upstage other people. For straddling, it's a similar desire, but different, desiring to get attention. Like, everybody look at me. And the Tao is quite different in the sense of being humble and authentic. The one who has the Tao has no need to impress others or try to get attention. Those things can happen naturally. Indeed, it is the best if they do happen naturally. So this is why Lao Tzu says, those who are on tiptoes cannot stand. Those who straddle cannot walk. And in connection to all this, I just want to remind everyone that in general, as we go through life, haste makes waste. That is, in the world, everything is so fast-paced. People pursue quick success, instant gratification, competing and rushing. The competing aspect is what the tiptoeing speaks to. The real achievement in the Tao is not that at all. It is more like a marathon. Wise people do not sprint in the beginning. The persistence, going the distance, are what truly matter. Trying too hard can only cause us to stumble. Moving on to line 3. Line 3 says, those who flaunt themselves are not clear. So, as before, I want to highlight the first part. Indeed, I want to showcase the first character. As discussed previously, this character means to be seen. In modern Mandarin, it means to see. The ancient context, no longer used in modern Mandarin, is to be seen. When you add the character of self in front of it, it literally means to let oneself be seen, which means to increase one's own visibility. And this is the first of the 4 lines that we will explore today. All 4 lines are connected to the first 2 lines. They're all related. They're all describing someone who becomes egocentric, wants to show off. How are they related specifically? Well, let's think about increasing one's visibility in the context of tiptoeing. Well, naturally, they're connected because to tiptoe means to raise one's profile, to stand out, or try to stand out. And increasing visibility is naturally connected to straddling or taking big steps, because the meaning there is to get attention, to walk in those exaggerated steps or striking this exaggerated pose. So now let's look at the last two characters of this line. I break these two characters down to talk about the literal meaning. So the first character you see there, which is the second from last character in the line, that's the character for no or not, 不. Then the last character there is 明, which means clear. This is a character that is often mistranslated as bright. If you were to see that character as bright and plug that into this line, you will get translations like, he who displays himself does not shine. So with the interpretation of clarity instead of brightness, we have two possible interpretations. Number one, those who show off end up not being distinguished or seen clearly. They show off, they flaunt because they want to be seen, but they end up with the opposite. They are not seen. They are ignored or unnoticed. The other interpretation of not being clear is the lack of clarity in the mind. It is to say, those who flaunt themselves are not clear in that they are not clear about the Tao or about themselves. They lack that clarity. They don't understand why they should not flaunt. Now, of the two interpretations, the first one is the one that connects well with the other three lines. Generally speaking, it's okay to think of the meaning as encompassing both. People who actually know themselves feel no need to flaunt. In fact, they often exude a quiet confidence. This is something that we see in other people from time to time, and something that you and I should aspire to. Moving on now to line 4. Line 4 says, those who presume themselves are not distinguished. So here, I want to first zoom in on the first two characters. It starts with the character for the self, followed by the character for yes, and this is the assumption that one is right. This is the assumption of oneself to be correct. It leads logically from the previous line. The previous line, to flaunt yourself, originates from arrogance about the self. Like, I am so great, I want everybody to see that. Hence, showing off. This leads to arrogance about one's opinions. That is, what I think is correct. Indeed, this usually takes the form of only what I think is correct. That's how arrogance can get out of control. People like that, usually because of the arrogance, are not able to understand other people's perspectives. It can also be the other way around. When somebody is unable to understand different perspectives, sometimes this is because of the lack of exposure, and it could be ignorance, the lack of education. Either way, the inability to understand points of view other than his own, that is why he becomes certain his views must be right. His way is the only way. So let me note that here with this bullet point, those who harbor this assumption cannot see other perspectives. Now, I want to also note carefully here that when we talk about different perspectives, as you go through life, you're going to have your own perspectives about everything, and then there's going to be other perspectives. The important thing to note is that to understand where other people are coming from, it does not imply or require that you agree with them. It is only that you know what they're thinking, that you understand. That understanding can give you insights like where they are wrong. So this makes you open-minded, but it doesn't make you agree with everybody necessarily. Indeed, just by understanding various perspectives, it can make your own position more complete and therefore stronger and better, more well-reasoned. On the other hand, if you are still in the trap of being presumptuous people tend to be self-righteous and inflexible. It is what happens when self-certainty becomes its own defense. Alternative views get dismissed out of hand, automatically regarded as inferior. And this can happen in any setting, even within one's own family. Just as an example, consider what happens in a family when a teenager suggests a better route for a family trip. But the parents insist on their own plan, overriding the suggestion. What does the kid know? He is only a kid. But then later on, find out the teenager was actually correct all along. Possibly the teenager got a great tip from a friend, or saw a tip on social media, whatever the case may be. Because of the teenager's age, his views were dismissed out of hand, automatically regarded as inferior. This is the often heard pattern, like people say, well, of course you would think that. You are a fill in the blank. Fill in the blank can be anything. It can be someone saying, of course you would think that you are a man. Note how such expressions reveal all the different ways that we divide ourselves. All aspects of one's background can be used to fill in the blank. So let us move on to the second part, the last two characters of this line, line 4. So again, line 4 says, those who presume themselves are not distinguished. So focusing on the last two characters, which is not distinguished, we can say that this kind of arrogance, to presume, to flaunt, this can be detected in the conceited conduct that we see in everyday life situations. The assumption of correctness just means in one's mind, the feeling is that he or she has superiority of position and the superior mind. It is one of the most common traps in life. As you and I observe the world, we can see a lot of people like this. People who, when they look at the world, they feel this self-satisfied certitude. Such people often feel they are not getting the credit they deserve for being right. They think they should be distinguished from the crowd. Why? Well, obviously because they are different and better. So they can be frustrated because other people do not seem to regard them the same way. What other people feel, there is a gap between that and what they feel about themselves. So for Tao cultivators, we want to, first of all, become aware that this is a pattern that is alive and well, and indeed that is all over the place. That awareness can lead us to reflection about ourselves. And where we find ourselves also engaging in some of these manifestations of arrogance, we have opportunities to do better. So we want to strike the right balance. By the right balance, what I mean is we want to be open-minded, but then we also want to have well-rounded positions. And I want to say that these two, to be open-minded and having a strong position, a good position, these are not opposed to each other. These can go hand in hand. Here is a reasoning from the Tao perspective. We start out, as I said, with the observation that there are open-minded and closed-minded people in every walk of life, at every level of society. Then we can also self-observe to realize that the more you and I learn about the Tao, the more we want to align with the former, the open-mindedness, over the latter, the closed-mindedness. Of course, we may wish for other people to also be more open-minded, less closed-minded. We cannot change how people are. We can change ourselves. And that is also where the challenge is. And when I say the well thought out position and being open-minded can go hand in hand, what I mean is when you understand how it looks for others, that understanding strengthens your own thoughts on the matter. You make your ideas, your position more complete by incorporating what other people can see that perhaps you cannot see quite so well. Now, when we talk about these ideas from the Tao Te Ching, I always want to be sure to bring them back to cultivation. It is especially important for us to be aware of how this concept applies because it is entirely possible for us to develop these egocentric feelings when we gain knowledge about the Tao. So, ironically, the Tao tells us to be humble, but then when we learn about the Tao, some of us can depart from that. There is a story from the Sixth Patriarch Platform Sutra that speaks directly to this idea. It is a story called Reciting Sutras. During the time of the Sixth Patriarch, this will be about 1350 years ago, so centuries ago, there was a monk by the name of Fa Da. He entered the monastic life at the age of 7, and he devoted his time to studying Buddhist Dharma. To further his studies, he would often recite the Lotus Sutra. The image that you see in this slide is part of the Lotus Sutra. One day, he visited Huineng, the sixth patriarch of Zen Buddhism. He bowed down upon meeting the patriarch, but his head did not touch the ground, as was dictated by the prevailing customs. The patriarch noticed this and pointed it out. He said, "If your bow does not touch the ground, it is as if you did not bow at all. You must be clinging to something in your heart. Tell me, what is your practice in your studies?" Fa Da replied, "I have recited the Lotus Sutra 3,000 times. The patriarch said, "If you recite it 10,000 times and understand its true meaning without thinking of the understanding as an achievement, then you can walk along with me. But now, you have turned your back on your practice, and you do not even realize your fault." Listen to this verse. Bowing is meant to cut down pride. Why does your head not touch the ground? Attached to self, guilt will arise. Forget your merits. Blessings unbound. Then the patriarch asked, "What is your name?" 法达. The patriarch remarked, "Your name means Dharma attainment. But have you truly attained the Dharma?" He then spoke another verse. Your name means attaining Dharma. You chant the sutra without rest. Empty chants only echo sounds. Clarity of mind is called bodhisattva. You have the affinity of karma. I shall tell you to point the way. Believe in the Buddha beyond words, and the lotus blooms in all you say. 法达 did not know how to respond to this. He began to realize the truth about the 3,000 repetitions in which he took so much pride. What he thought was an achievement was actually not what he imagined it represented. The end. The Tao. There is a lot to dig into in this story because the verses require some time to really delve into and understand. Overall, this story is especially well suited to illustrate the wisdom that we're studying in this chapter. Because Fa Da fell into the trap of self-presumption. He knew his reciting the Lotus Sutra 3,000 times was not something that other people could easily match. Indeed, most of them would consider his feat to be very impressive. So, because of this, he felt it gave him a high status. So much so that he could skip the usual expression of respect to the sixth patriarch. So this is something that you and I need to take to heart. His bow did not touch the ground, and it was not because of any physical difficulty, but because in his mind, he held himself above others. So it was not physical, it was mental. What about us? In our own lives, how often do you and I appear humble outwardly while remaining proud inwardly? Let us be honest with ourselves. How often do we justify and cling to some perceived merits or past deeds? When asked about his practice, Fa Da responded with the fact of his recitations, as if that would somehow explain away his lack of respect. This was a form of self-proclamation. He felt right, and fully justified in his own mind. This was an illusion that the sixth patriarch dispelled with his verse. 慧能 deliver impromptu poetry, basically, to make a penetrating observation. What is that observation? Well, people often mistook work and effort for enlightenment, not realizing the repetition that was only a starting point. Real understanding was also required. Specifically, understanding without the ego. If Fa Da had reached that level, not only would he be able to walk alongside the patriarch, like Huineng said, but he would also be naturally humble and respectful in their meeting. It is the same for us. You and I may take pride in studying the Tao Te Ching, but going over the text by Lao Tzu, well, that is only a starting point. We also need to understand the Tao itself to apply it in practical, everyday situations. And this cultivation, it's got to be free of the ego for us as well. If the knowledge we acquire makes us arrogant, then we too have fallen into the same trap as Fa Da. This is exactly as Lao Tzu says in Tao Te Ching 24. Those who presume themselves are not distinguished. This is so important, as we can see in this particular story. Fa Da might consider himself distinguished, but his lack of humility said otherwise. We too may think of ourselves highly for knowing what other people do not. But if Lao Tzu were here, he would be the first to tell us that we are gravely mistaken. This line from Lao Tzu reveals another profound truth. The moment we claim righteousness, the moment we think we have arrived, we stop growing as individuals. Epiphanies in the Tao, they come not through self-promotion, but through quiet virtues. The Tao does not favor those who are certain of their certitude. Instead, it rewards those who continue to explore well past the initial discoveries and insights. And this was also why Huineng was unimpressed by numbers alone. He knew all too well that effort was not the same as transformation. Repetition alone did not impart realization. Spiritual progress could not come from an accumulation of points, but only from emptying the self in order to let insights unfold like a lotus blossom. So we can conclude that Huineng's lesson, just like Lao Tzu, that lesson is timeless. In traversing our own journeys, we need to follow this example in looking for the light of clarity and the absence of ego. when we stop trying to prove we have attained something, that is when we begin to touch the ground of true wisdom. Now, let us continue onward to the next line. Line 5 says, those who praise themselves have no merit. So here, I think I would point out something we all know. Praise by oneself is always met with skepticism. So conversely, praise from others is always regarded as having greater validity. So this is why when we engage in self-praise, we get negative results. First, we end up with distrust. Distrust of everything else the arrogant person says. So not only is self-praise distrusted to begin with, but it taints everything else that is being said. All other statements are tainted with the same distrust. And the other part of it is disrespect, diminished view of the person's character. This erosion of respect is yet another negative effect. It spreads, it downgrades the person's reputation. So you and I, we don't want to be that person. So let me focus on the last two characters of this line. 无功. So the line again says, those who praise themselves have no merit. And this is because the objective of self-praise is to claim credit for an accomplishment. Now, the result is not getting the credit that you wish to receive. The result is the opposite, that people become unwilling to give any credits at all. Tao cultivators, because of their realization and observation of this, they instead will focus on allowing their work to speak for them. So this will be, I think, another example where when we are going contrary to the Tao, counter to the Tao, you end up getting the opposite of what we would prefer. And just by observing and noting the reality, the consequences of self-praise, Tao cultivators know self-praise is not the Tao. This does not mean they refuse to talk about what they have done, because evasion and avoidance are also not the Tao. Tao cultivators are glad to discuss what they have done without any self-praise. Now, what if people don't ask about it? What if others don't bring up the subject? Well, then it would simply be because that there's no real positive impact that other people have noticed. If the work has a genuine positive effect on others, then people will ask about it. If they don't ask, then it's not something that is meaningful to them. So this is the third manifestation of arrogance that I wanted to go over with you today. We still have a fourth. But we are now approaching the top of the hour, so I want to end our discussion at this point today and then continue next time with the fourth point, with stories to illustrate, and so on. For now, though, we should conclude by summarizing what we have gone over, and let the fourth one be a preview for our next meeting. Today, we've been focusing on the negative effects of arrogance. We started out with the tiptoes, the straddling, the big steps. Those are ego-sourced, contrived actions. They tire you out quickly. As we said, as we discussed, tiptoes represent trying to stand out. Big steps, rushing, being excessively forceful. So then, beyond the tiptoeing and the straddling, we talked about flaunting, showing off, displaying oneself. The goal of showing off is to get recognition. But far from being recognized, people dismiss the self-promotion. We're also talking about the people who are presumptuous of their own correctness, their own certitude. They usually think of their own opinions as the best. But in the real world, they find out nobody else thinks of your thoughts as highly as you do. They get the opposite of what they think they deserve. The third one that we have just gone over is praising oneself. So this has a negative consequence, as we have talked about, that other people will disregard the self-given credit. They will question your credibility. And as I said, even your character is brought into question. The fourth one is boasting. As a preview for our next discussion, boasting means any success becomes temporary at best. The underlying idea, underlying all of these, all of the points that you see here, is to advocate for the moderation of the Tao, to follow a natural rhythm in all that you do, not overreaching, not forcing. And I mentioned the proverb, haste makes waste, or more haste, less speed. So the message overall is that a steady, balanced progress is far more effective than any attempts to stand on tiptoes or take big steps. I want to be sure that I mention share the Tao. The easiest way to access Tao resources is to visit my author website, dereklin.com. There, you can click on links and go to the webpage where you will find everything listed, such as Taoism.net, with information about the Tao and also about this meeting. Our Facebook community, where you can ask questions or discuss your thoughts on the Tao with others. Our YouTube channel, where you can watch recordings of all our previous meetings. My Amazon author page, where you can find books and audiobooks for your continuing exploration. You can also go directly with the web address dereklin.com/links, as you can see. You can use these resources to share the Tao with the people you know who may be interested. When you see the benefits of Tao cultivation in your life, you can share your experience with others through your comments in Facebook or YouTube. If you find my books or audiobooks to be helpful, you can post your reviews on Amazon to help others discover the Tao. This is the path that I am on, so I can say sharing the Tao has benefited me personally in every aspect of life. I would like to invite you to come along with me to share the Tao. Let us travel together on the path in the journey of life. Our meeting has come to an end, but the journey continues on. Until next time, may the Tao fill you with peace and happiness.